Allison, welcome back to the BelTel. Now, we have visited this case, but very sparingly because just there isn't that much to say. There are multiple characters here at play. Of course, the latest was in October, the last time we touched it. Could you just run me through this latest news?
So, as you mentioned, John George's body was found in a very remote area of the Alicante region in January, over 3 weeks after his family started searching for him. He went missing on the 14th of December 2024, and it's that night that the police in Spain believe he was killed. He was stabbed, he was shot, and he was stripped naked, and his body dumped in a remote rural area. There only ever have been 2 suspects in relation to the murder of John George, Michel Maly and Johnny Smith, originally from Newton Abbey, but has been living in Spain for quite some time, were the only 2 main suspects. Maly has been cooperating with the Guardia Civil and detectives in Torrevieja from quite early on. Now, originally, maybe he might have been reluctant, but within a very short time, he then started cooperating with the authorities. And we know this because it was the information that he provided that led to the discovery of John George's body. Now, John George's father, Billy, had said, "I'm not leaving Spain till I find my son," but that search was exhaustive, and they would never have looked in the area where he was because it was nowhere near where he had been staying. So Michel Maly gave evidence to that, and then he gave evidence in relation to what he said happened, and he claims that obviously Johnny Smith was the main aggressor, and this Johnny Smith denies that. Johnny Smith goes on the run, so he takes off with his then girlfriend, now wife, Madison Allen, and he's then arrested in Portugal on foot of a European arrest warrant and extradited back to Spain. Michel Maly has been on bail the entire time. He's been on bail for a number of reasons. First of all, he cooperated with the authorities, but also he was not considered a flight risk, whereas Johnny Smith was. Then in December of last year, 2025, Johnny Smith is released on €100,000 bail. And that is probably as up to date as we were on the story until yesterday, Monday. We started hearing news coming from Spain that a body had been found in Torrevieja, and it was believed to be that of Michel Maly. And that was confirmed later on in the evening that a murder investigation has now been launched, and that he's believed that he was shot dead close to a seaside, a coastal area. His body was found by a passerby at around 1:30 in the morning on Sunday.
So that's all we know at the minute. And he was shot?
He was shot, and at this time, no one has been arrested. The same murder investigation team who were investigating the murder of John George are in charge of this investigation. They haven't done a press conference or anything as yet, so they haven't confirmed whether they're linking the 2.
And this isn't the first, gang-related sort of gun attack that's been in the area?
No, there was a British man who was shot dead in December. A few weeks before that, a very well-known Liverpool gangster called Sonny Redmond was shot in his car, was riddled with bullets in an underground car park, and he survived that shooting. He then fled back to Liverpool where he was arrested. He's currently in prison in Liverpool. There was shootings around him, and there's also a man missing, also from Liverpool, who has been reported missing by his family, who was in the same area with some of these same people and who hasn't been found.
Obviously, this is a different jurisdiction to here. But, typically if a suspect does die, pre-trial, before anything formally legal starts, what actually happens then? Because he wasn't the sole suspect.
He isn't. So there's 2 suspects. There's him, there was Maly and Johnny Smith. I am coming to this as, had this happened here, what would happen? And that's, I know the law here very well. I've been doing this kind of reporting for 25 years. I don't particularly know the law very well in Spain, although I will say since the murder of John George, I have pretty much gotten to know how the law works in Spain. So they were the only 2 suspects. They were expected to be charged and stand trial for this murder. Albeit, had this been in Northern Ireland or anywhere else anywhere in the United Kingdom, they would have been charged, and then the court date would have been set, the investigation would have continued, and then they would have faced trial. In Spain, what happens is the police finish their investigation, they give the file to the judge looks through the file, they have questions that need answered, so they can call various witnesses during this period. There's a backlog in the courts, as there is here as well. And then shortly before the trial is due to start, they're brought before the judge, they're formally charged, and they enter their plea of guilty or not guilty. And then a trial date will be set, but it'll be set within days. It'll be set almost straight away, and then that'll take place. So that was due to happen. The family of John George had hoped that was going to happen later on this year, at the very latest, at the start of 2027. Yeah. That has clearly now been thrown into some doubt. So what will happen? I've been speaking to members of the George family today. they have been speaking to their solicitor in Spain. They believe that there's enough other corroborating evidence to continue on with the trial process with just Johnny Smith as the sole suspect in this case. The problem that I would foresee is that Michel Maly was going to be witness for the state. He provided information to the police, which is well documented, and the police in Spain have that documentation.
Would that mean that Maly's evidence would be void then, or
His evidence can still be submitted, and there is other, I believe, corroborating evidence in terms of phone signals and where mobile phones were pinging during the time when all this was happening. There is other evidence and forensic evidence and all sorts of other things. So the trial, they hope, is still going to go ahead as planned. But I mean, I could be sitting here next week with you talking about something completely different that's happened since.
you mentioned you spoke to the Georges earlier today. What have they had to say about the whole situation?
Well, they're not gloating. They're not gloating about the death of this person. Courtney George put a post on her TikTok just saying, she felt nothing for him, and therefore they're still going to continue with what they were doing, which was trying to get justice for their brother. It's for them. It seems like every time there's an event that they're trying to process their grief, something like this happens. So, at Christmas, when it would have been the anniversary of John George's death, they were going back to Spain. Johnny Smith was released on bail around that time. Madison Allen was also stopped in a car with 2 loaded guns in the car. That's still under investigation. And then this week, John George's headstone, his gravestone, had arrived. Obviously, it had been ordered for quite some time. It was put in place and they were going to the grave for that. And as they were going to the grave for that, obviously, they get this news. So I think it seems to them that every time they try to process their grief, something happens. But, Courtney George is a lovely young woman. She handles herself with great dignity. And she, as she said, we're not celebrating. I don't feel anything for this man. So they're hoping that they'll still get a trial and that things will progress as they have been. And they've been assured by their solicitor that that's going to be the case.